Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Cyberside Chats. My name is Matt Durrin. I'm the Director of Training and Research for LMG Security, and we have a very special guest this week. Joining us remotely from parts unknown is Karen Sprenger. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, glad to be here. I'm Karen Sprenger. I'm the COO at LMG Security, and I've been in IT a long time, as well as cybersecurity specialties and incident response. And I'm excited to talk some more today.
I'm super excited to have you here. And for those of you who have read our ransomware book, Karen's name might look familiar. She is one of the co-authors of that book, which meant Karen and I got to spend about 18 months basically continuously on Zoom writing out the different stories that we've gleaned over the years from both IT, from incident response, from forensics, and all of those other kind of fun things. But today,
Don't forget talking to criminals.
oh yeah, talking to criminals. That is one of my favorite things that you do, honestly. Today, though, we are going to be talking about something a little bit different. We are going to be going into a little bit of depth on a couple of headlines that popped up recently about the use of Signal, Gmail, or other potentially unauthorized communication platforms in things like the federal government, as a good example for that. So before we really get into it, I think we need to level set a little bit and talk about what these apps actually are. And there are a lot of different options when it comes to how you communicate either on a laptop, on a phone, on a tablet, or really any other electronic device that you might be using. One that's become really popular recently has been an application called Signal. Now, Signal, if you're not familiar with it, is a free open source messaging app, and it is highlighted as being very secure. It has end-to-end encryption built in. It's supposed to give you like a military grade style security experience. And a lot of people have started using it as an alternative to standard text messaging, which is great, especially if you're a journalist, an activist, you're in technology, and you desire that kind of privacy. But it's not always the best when it comes down to enterprise usage. And Karen, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I mean, encryption is great, and I would like to say Signal is great. I use it myself. However,
You and I were talking on Signal earlier.
yes, mostly we exchange memes, let's be honest. But
That's fair.
yeah, so I mean, most people who are using it because it encrypts conversations. And also, I like it because it doesn't collect a lot of metadata. So it's not going to look through my conversations so it can target me with ads and things like that. It's not owned by a large corporation. As you said, it's open source software. Open source software, some folks tend to think that means it's less secure, but actually, in many cases, it means it's been regularly tested and vetted and improved upon by the open source community. So it undergoes pretty rigorous testing in that situation. But the main thing that sets it apart is that it's a consumer grade application. It was not meant to be an enterprise application. So there's no way to manage it. As an organization, you can't control if messages are set for deletion or if they're stored or if they're shared. It also, it doesn't allow you to have any control over who is being added to your chats, which seems pertinent as we've seen recently. And yes, I'm sure all of us have accidentally sent a text to someone we didn't mean to send it to. But that's why we need to be careful about what we're using these applications for. And, for our clients, Signal is not something that you would want being used as an organization-wide tool because you can't manage it.
Right, yeah. So for like immediate, like emergency communication or something like that, we talk about this in our ransomware tabletops. If you have a trusted group of people in your organization, like say your security staff, and you need that external source of communication that's going to be there if Teams goes down or if your internal network is broken or something like that. I mean, it can be a good stopgap. It's not something that we would recommend using long term. Again, because there's the potential for somebody being added to the chat that shouldn't be there and for information to be disclosed. And that brings us to the actual headline that we're talking about here. So if you've been watching the headlines lately, you may or may not have seen a little snafu involving the Department of Defense and the use of the Signal application. And to give you just a background on this, there was a Signal group chat that was created by Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth and other members, J.D. Vance of the Trump administration, were all a part of this group chat. Accidentally, though, there was a reporter from The Atlantic named Jeffrey Goldberg who was added to the chat. And the other members decided to start talking about some, we won't call them like classified pieces of information because I think the government came out and said they're not classified, but they were definitely sensitive. It was information about a military operation happening in Yemen. And again, this was not a hacking incident. It's not like Signal got hacked or anything like that. This was a simple mistake that somebody in the group chat made, added somebody that or someone that shouldn't be there, and that information then went out to absolutely everyone. Again, common problem. We've all sent a text message to someone that we didn't intend to. We've all had someone in a group chat that we probably said something about that they weren't supposed to hear. But this was a little bit bigger of a deal because it was military information and because of the specific names that were involved in it. And this isn't like the only instance we've seen recently of a consumer grade tool being used for potentially sensitive government communications. I know Gmail popped up. Karen, we were talking about this one a little bit earlier. The use of something like a standard mail app. I mean, have you run into that with your years in IT?
I absolutely have. We call that shadow IT, right? So if you don't provide an application that is easy for someone to use, they tend to find one themselves. And so in your job as an IT admin or a security person, you need to balance security with usability. At the same time, you need to make sure your users understand why it's important. Why, for instance, we wouldn't recommend using Gmail. And there's a variety of those. If you're using a personal Gmail account, it doesn't have, again, the enterprise management tools. You can't back it up. You don't have any access to protect it. Google does offer some protection against malware and things like that, but some still gets through. And so if you don't have those additional steps at your enterprise to block it, that's a problem. And by Google's own privacy policy, they state right in their terms of service and privacy policy that they access your data so that they can target ads to you and understand who are your most important contacts. And you agree to that when you sign up, which if you want to do that personally is great. I do have a Gmail account, but you really can't agree with that on behalf of the organization.
Right. I can't remember if it's still in their terms of service, but I remember for a while there was that little line in there about how they were reserving the right to publicly perform any data that they found inside your email account. And I don't know about you, I've never actually seen an email be performed before, but it sounds
I'd kind of
interesting. I
like
don't
to
know.
see that. Yeah, maybe we should do that for the next LMG holiday.
I love it. Well, the person that we're talking about here is, again, Mike Waltz from the U.S. government. And there was a news story that came out just recently that Waltz and some of his staffers had been using personal Gmail accounts to discuss things like U.S. military positions, potential weapons systems, things like that. And again, this is likely not going to be classified as, well, classified information, but it is sensitive, and it's stuff that probably doesn't need to be sitting in a random public Gmail account. Also, there is when we're talking about the government anyway, I mean, there is an expectation that government communications are free information. I mean, there is the Freedom of Information Act that allows us to request that data. And if this is sitting off in someone's public Gmail account or a personal Gmail account, that makes it really difficult to track where that data is actually going, what kind of communications are happening. It just causes problems. And Karen, I know you made the comment earlier, like based on what's going in and out of this email account, I would love to see what his targeted ads look like. I mean, what is Google going to advertise to it?
Yeah.
But again, it's not just the apps. This leads to the reason we're talking about this is it leads to a much bigger issue about shadow IT and the use of non-sanctioned or non-standard communication tools inside your organization. I know so at LMG we have a bring your own device system that we use where the applications on my device are containerized. So any information I have that's coming from LMG specifically is off in its own little encrypted container. If something happens to my device, it is reasonably protected at that point. But I don't know, Karen, what other advice would you have for people on how to actually handle these things?
I mean, that's really what we advise our clients is, first of all, for your employees, don't use personal accounts on business devices. Likewise, don't use your business accounts on your personal devices. With personal devices, you really don't have any control over, who's using those. I mean, I know that many folks got to hand their phone off to their kids to play some games while they're waiting in the doctor's office or something like that. You don't know, they may be downloading malware accidentally. So you have to be really cautious about keeping that separate. And that's why we use containerized, because that keeps our business pieces separate. We also have management over that so that, yeah, if you lose your device, I can hit a button and wipe it.
That's got to be a little bit of comfort, and thankfully we've never had to go that route.
And I
My
should make clear, Matt, I would only wipe our container, not your whole device.
Well, I didn't give you permissions to wipe the rest of the device. That was the beautiful thing about it. Like the fact that I'm using my device for business purposes, but I still get to maintain like my autonomy on that device, which is a nice thing, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, and this again, this comes down to usability in a lot of cases. Like I know there are people who will simply turn to using things like Gmail or a free Outlook.com account or Signal or WhatsApp or Telegram or anything else, mainly because of convenience. I mean, if a piece of communication software that your organization is using is incredibly locked down or is really really restrictive, then you may try to find a way around that. I know we talked earlier about how this is really pervasive in healthcare as something that we've noticed over the years. I mean, and it makes sense. A doctor is in a hurry. He's trying to get in to see a patient. He needs their medical records to go. And if the software that the hospital is using isn't providing him with that fast enough, then he may just email those records off to his Gmail account and pop it open on his cell phone while he's in the room. And we've seen this happen before. But it also means if that email account gets compromised, which we all know that never happens, then you end up potentially losing all of that data too.
Yep.
All right, well, let's go over. We have a couple of takeaways that we really wanted to talk about here. And I think there's a few things that are important about this story. And again, we're not trying to slam dunk on the government or anything like that, although they did have a series of, let's just call them less favorable stories come out in a pretty rapid succession, mostly to do with communications. But there are things that we can do to help ourselves along in this process. And the first thing that we need to do is actually take a look at how we allow our staff to communicate. I mean, what applications are we giving them? What options are we giving them? Is this actually suitable? Are we giving them Slack? Do they have Discord? Do they have access to messaging applications? Are we providing them the devices? There's a lot of different things that can go into this. There's also things like data loss prevention tools, which can see potentially when something is sent out from our environment. And Karen, I know we were talking about alternatives, like what other options can you give people if they're not happy with their tools? I mean, what have you seen as a good alternative to some of these more, I guess, common methods?
I think the main thing to look for is something that can be managed by the organization, and so that they have some control over it. Yes, encryption is good. Definitely want encryption both at rest and in transit, end-to-end encryption. One of the tools that I have used and like is Slack. Slack works well, but I would also encourage people to, whatever tool they pick, take advantage of the security options. So, there's no reason to save conversations in Slack for months and months or years and years. You can have those auto delete after a set amount of time, unless you are a regulated industry that requires, or the government that requires, that you monitor and maintain data for a specific amount of time. I also think things that you can control, how are they logging in? Are they using two-factor authentication or passkeys or biometrics? Are they securing it with more than just an 8-character password? Those kinds of things will make the use of the app much more secure. And then finally, and I know I'm probably one of the few who does this, but read the privacy policy. Where do they store their data? Is it being stored in the United States? And do you fall under those laws, or is it being stored in another country? If so, will it meet your requirements? But what are they doing with your data? Can they access your data? Can they use it to target ads at you? Can they use it to improve their product? Are they selling it to third parties? I think all of that is very important to pay attention to when you're vetting these applications. And there's some great ones out there. Even using iMessage on an Apple device, there's encryption involved if you're sending it to another Apple device, not the green bubbles like I get with Matt.
Ouch.
Sorry.
Well, you also have to make sure you don't. You also have to make sure you don't, send it to the wrong person or something like that. Encryption doesn't really matter if you're just sending it to incorrect people.
Correct.
I like how you brought up the policy too. That's a big one. I will fully admit that there have been times I have signed an end user license agreement without actually reading it. I think we all probably have, but it's important to understand that. Yeah. Next, we need to make sure that we're educating our users with context. I mean, if you just tell somebody like don't use Signal and you don't give them any reason why, they may just not listen. And again, when we're dealing with personal devices inside of our enterprise environment, we always have to assume that there's the risk that some kind of application that is not on our list of approved apps is going to be there. If we provide users with that context and we let them know why we don't want them to use this, and we give them a good alternative, then we lower that risk. We end up with less of a chance that they're going to end up installing and then potentially transferring sensitive information on it. And then finally, make sure that you are prepared if something goes wrong with one of these shadow communication systems, because again, they are somewhat pervasive. We see them in a lot of cases. So update your incident response documentation, work something like this into one of your tabletop exercises. Make sure you're just prepared if something goes wrong. And yeah, Karen, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, just make sure that you know what your users are using. And if you can, under policy, prevent them from using unauthorized tools. And of course, use all of the tools at your disposal: DLP, antivirus, anti-malware, threat hunting, whatever you can do.
Perfect.
I do want to add, be prepared to address it.
Oh,
It's going
yeah.
to happen sometime. Somebody will send the email to the wrong person or a conversation with the wrong person, and know what you're going to do to address it.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes, some larger than others, some more public than others. But yeah, it's important to keep that in mind. All right. Well, thanks everyone so much for joining. Again, my name is Matt Durrin. This has been Cyberside Chats. We're going to be at RSA in San Francisco coming up here pretty soon, doing a tabletop on artificial intelligence-backed extortion. So that one should be a lot of fun. If you're in the area, come swing by, say hi to us. Have a glass of whiskey, something like that. Otherwise, we will see you all next time. Thank you so much, everyone.